I'm Adrienne Giffen, and this is Now You're Talking. Parenting in the digital world can feel overwhelming, especially when you're balancing a career, raising teens and preteens, and trying to keep up with it all. Screens are constant, and sometimes real connection feels out of reach. This podcast is your chance to pause and breathe, a space for stories and insights that bring encouragement, perspective, and the reminder that you are not alone. Today's conversation is an invitation to slow down, gather, and reconnect through something we all share: food. I am joined by Melanie Underwood, founder of Nourish and Gather. With nearly 30 years of experience and more than 50,000 students taught, Melanie uses cooking as a non-judgmental sensory pathway to mindfulness, confidence, and community. In this episode, we talk about parenting in the digital age, setting boundaries with technology, learning through mistakes, cultural connection through food, and how shared meals can quietly rebuild the human skills so many of us feel we're losing. Let the conversations begin. Thank you, Melanie, for joining me today. I am so excited to hear about your journey and how you created the company Nourish and Gather. And a company that's more, it started with cooking, but it's so much more than that. It's about helping people to trust themselves, people of all ages. So I'm just really looking forward to hearing your story.
Well, thank you for having me, and I'm super excited. So I grew up on a farm, and we ate dinner together every night. And I was a journalism pre-law major going into school, but realized that was not the path I was meant to take. And my mom gave me a very sage piece of advice, which was, you should do something you love because you may do it forever. And I said, well, the only thing I really love is baking, right?
Yeah.
How lucky was I to have that mom?
Wow. Yes. Boy.
Yeah. So anyway, I started baking at a local bakery, and then fortunately worked with a chef in DC who had an opportunity to open the Four Seasons Hotel here in New York City. And I applied, and sort of the rest was history. And then I went into teaching by accident because I had to have an emergency appendectomy. And that's a perfect example of something that you don't think is going to mean anything in your life being life-changing.
Yes.
I couldn't lift anything heavy. They said for 2 months, you can't go back to work. I asked a friend of mine, can I work in the office at the cooking school they worked at? They checked with the owner. The owner said yes. And the owner met me and said, why don't you think about teaching? And I said, oh my God, that's terrible. I'm so bossy. And little did I know it was something that I loved. And I actually was incredibly patient for people learning. And it changed my entire life.
Wow. So that adversity in your life changed the absolute course of your life.
Yes.
That's incredible. And at that point, you hadn't created your company. That was just, wasn't even an idea at that point. Now, so talk about, please, and share how you do have impact. And maybe you could share a couple of stories that will help other parents to really understand the power of gathering and cooking.
Well, I think one of the biggest ways I have impact with adults and kids is my ability to not be judgmental. And I think that's really important. I grew up with a mom who was not judgmental and a dad who was moderately judgmental, with my mom reminding him, don't bring judgment into it because it really inhibits people. And I learned that it inhibits people from learning. Yes. So I think if parents, and I'm a parent, can step out of the judgment zone with kids, it's one of the best things that you can do because you allow kids the space to make mistakes. And when they know that you're not judging them for the mistakes that they're going to make and we made and people will continue to make, it's part of the growth process, that they feel safe and that they want to talk to you and they want to come to you and say, hey, I made this mistake. And that dialogue, the conversation piece, there's nothing better than that because your kids trust you, you trust them. And I know that every person that I come in contact with feels that way about me. And I know that there's a ripple effect, young or old, that they know like, oh God, I don't need to bring judgment into this. I had a class last week and the kids were debating Napoleon. And they're younger kids and they were like, no, he was terrible. And someone else was like, no, he was amazing. And they did get a little intense. And I stepped in and just said, could he be both? You know, through people always are like, oh, it's just a cooking class until they come and take a class and they realize, wow, this is a cooking class plus. And the kids really learned, oh my gosh, I can have this conversation that I feel passionate about, but I can still respect the person across from me and hear that person.
Wow. And was that a class, a cooking class with young people?
Yeah.
And they were having this, when they were having this open dialogue about Napoleon over cooking.
Yes. And that's what happens with food, whether you're at the dinner table or in the kitchen. Food has this way of allowing people just to start talking and opening up and sharing things that they wouldn't share otherwise.
Yes. Well, how you mentioned on your website, falling forward and teaching or allowing kids and people of all ages, because we're all a work in progress, teaching people to fall forward. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, please?
Yes. I mean, like I said, we all make mistakes, right? It's sort of tripping, but not feeling like, oh my God, I screwed up. Because I mean, people always say to me, oh my God, how do you have this positive attitude? Because I'm like, well, nothing I do is wrong. It's just a pivot. And that appendicitis story is a perfect example.
Yes.
Where I could have just said, oh my God, this is horrible. But I was like, I'm going to go with the flow. And my mom always instilled that in me, and my dad and my grandparents. Like, you don't have control over many things, but you have control over your attitude.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really believe that we just sort of fall forward. We're not falling down. We don't even need to pick ourselves back up. We're just like, a little bit of stumble, but I'm going to keep going and it's going to work out.
Wow. Well, how did you then integrate sound into the cooking and meditation? It doesn't align when I read it, but it must just come from who you are and where you come from.
I fear it doesn't align for people. It's hard to have a business that people are like, oh my God, that doesn't align.
Tell us more.
No, I will. It's, you know what? I had anxiety as a young person in my 20s. Mm-hmm. And I think part of it was moving to New York City from a farm and feeling like just so much angst. And I really felt like I felt like a fish out of water, 1,000%. I worked in these very large hotels that had extremely high expectations. And I was 21. And my mother would always laugh, and she was like, oh my God, you go into jobs and you're not prepared for them, but you always make it work. But I think as a result, I started having anxiety, and I went to a doctor and he said, oh my God, you need to start meditating. And I was like, oh, that sounds terrible. Sitting still, I'm feeling anxious even talking about it. And he said there's other ways to meditate. And I realized that I'd probably been using sound as a form of meditation my whole life. My dad really could play any instrument. He was quite talented, and we always had a lot of singing in our home. But I think that sound was like very soothing. And I listened to Gregorian chants as a teenager, and I realized when he started talking about other ways to meditate, that there were other ways to meditate. But stepping into work, I had to pull in quick techniques. And so and I realized like, oh my gosh, I'm cooking. That's literally using every sense available. There's no sense that you do not use when you are cooking, if you think about it, right? You're obviously using your eyes. You're cooking, you're using your hands, you're touching things, you're washing things, you're cutting, smell, yes, taste, and sound. And people, I am a meditation teacher on an app called Insight Timer, and people are very surprised that I use sound as a very strong medium, even in cooking. And that's, I think, one of the things about teaching is I can be looking at you and I hear the way the vegetables change in the oven, the way the batter changes when it's mixing on the mixer. And I'm like, oh, that's ready. And people are like, oh my God, you didn't look. But I'm just using that as a way to give me feedback. But that allows you to be very much in the present moment. And it's very soothing for anxiety, because being anxious is not being in the present moment. It's like either thinking about the past or the future, but being moment in cooking, you can completely be in that moment and not worry about all the other things.
And was that something that you developed over time, or just that was innately within you? How did that happen?
I think when the doctor said you don't need to sit still to meditate and to be mindful, I was trying to just pay attention more to things around me. And then I realized this very thing that I do every single day is a tool. And then when I started teaching, it was so easy to teach others because I taught at a school in Manhattan for a long time, adults. And obviously a lot of adults in New York City have anxiety. So it was a great tool to be able to impart to other people that you can use this as a very soothing technique. And it's like habit stacking, right? You have to eat, you have to cook, and you're helping yourself with potentially anxiety and connecting. It's very, I think, grounding and connecting to work with food because it's grown in the soil and that's the earth. And it's just this full on cycle of what we consume and how we connect with it when we prepare the food.
Yes. I find that so fascinating because I've never thought of food having sound. I mean, to chew, but not in the process of cooking it.
Yes.
So is that a real awakening moment for people when you describe that?
It is. I mean, because they're like you. They're like, I never thought of that. But then they all of a sudden realize there's sound everywhere. Sauteing, a hood, the washing machine, the batter in this pan. Like, there's nothing that you're not doing. Even like if you take your spoon, a wooden spoon, and you're stirring, you're making sound. Yes. You're hitting up against your pan. I mean, one of my followers on Insight Timer always says from kitchen bowls to sound bowls.
Yeah, that is so. Well, I see on your website, you're using one of those sound bowls, but that's so true. So we all have access to this when we're aware.
Absolutely. And it's so easy. It's already there.
That's so easy. But yes. So what was that? I'm fascinated to know what it was like for you to go from a farm to Manhattan. I mean, I just can't imagine a greater contrast than that.
And there is none. I mean, it was all the things. It was very exhilarating and it felt so exciting, but it also felt very uncomfortable. I definitely, my first, I would say 2 years, had a very strong longing for what I knew because I grew up in such a small place that if I went into a store, people would say, oh, you're Charles Carter's daughter because I look like him.
Yes. Yeah.
And I went to this place where back then in the banks, they had bulletproof glass. It was a very different New York than it is now.
Mm-hmm.
I was just like, oh God, it's impossible here. That's how I felt. Everything felt hard.
Yeah. But was it somehow, did you even know back then that it was somehow aligned with your purpose?
No, I did not. I've always been very purpose driven, and this is a little bit off the beaten path, but when I was 21, I got out of work on a Friday and a gentleman, it's going to make me cry. He fell on Park Avenue. He fell on the street and I reached down to help him. And I remember being surrounded by 1,000 people and not a single soul looked at him. Not a single soul put their hand down to help him. And I was just so put off by that because I remember thinking, oh my gosh, what if this was me? And nobody would help. I do think it's very different today in New York than it was then. But for me, that moment actually really struck me because I was like, I want to make sure I never get to that space where I can't put a hand out for someone else.
Yes. So in that way, you bringing people together and connection and conversation and gathering, that may have been a pivotal moment again, another pivotal moment.
Yeah.
It sounds like.
Yeah, I think it happened definitely once I started teaching because I was getting feedback from, at the time I only taught adults, how great they felt after taking a class, how they felt connected, how they felt really confident. They had a lot of feelings that they had not felt before. And I am a great connector in general, and I make people feel pretty grounded. Being able to connect people in a room and being able to, I'm a conversationalist. I can talk to anybody about anything.
Yeah.
People do not have that skill. And I think that's something I brought into the cooking classes and still do, is that ability to find out something about you and find out something about someone else and connect it for you all.
Connect the dots. That's it. So in this digital era, Melanie, with how, we're so pulled and we're so scattered, how is what you're doing? And again, helping other parents. What are some thoughts around coping skills for kids these days?
I mean, I think this is an unpopular opinion, but I really think parents need to be able to set boundaries better than they do. And, I know asking kids to put away their devices can be really hard for people, but it's our job. And no one likes to hear it, because when people hear me say this, they actually think I'm judging them, and I'm not. I'm trying to give people permission. You want to do that. And sitting at the dinner table without a device is so important. We have 2 kids. The youngest is 16. It's a battle. He's like, I'm not on my phone. And he's like pulling it out of his pocket. But these are the places that conversations happen, whether it's cooking or eating, because kids aren't paying as much attention to, oh my gosh, I'm going to focus on what I'm saying, because they're doing something else, especially with cooking. I will say parents are shocked if they cook with their kids. Kids just open up and start talking because their hands are busy. They're chopping, they're cleaning lettuce. And believe me, in my own cooking classes with other kids, the stuff I learn is insane. It happens to parents. So just taking the time to cook and eat with your children, or even other kids, inviting other kids over, does nothing but build community. And on a side note, it does teach kids a lot about food and taking care of themselves and those practical skills that a lot of people no longer have. But it's that connection piece that so brings it together.
Yes, yeah. And people of all ages too, because that's something that we all have in common. So there could be lots of sharing.
Exactly. I mean, I do a lot of my work. I mean, in our own family, for Christmas, we choose a different country every year to make the food that they would make.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I do a whole series of cooking classes that are based on other countries, because I want people, especially young people, to realize, like, we may be different, but we are actually fundamentally the same. And in a space where we're really building division, I'm trying to build unity.
Yes. And what country are you focusing on this year?
So this year we're actually being a little more eclectic. We usually double down on one country, but we're doing risotto from Italy, and we're putting truffles from France. We're making pork with prunes from France, and then we're doing a potato cake, which is Swiss. And then we're doing a French cake for dessert. Usually we do pick one, but we've picked France before, so we were like, we're going to incorporate some other. This was like all of our favorites.
Oh, that's great. And then do you bring the kids in that decision-making process to decide what you're going to have? And then how does that play out during the holidays?
Well, our oldest son is 28, so he's not here anymore, but he loves to cook more than our younger son. So we would just cook together. We would pick out recipes together. We would pick a country together collectively. And then we would go online and do research for recipes and find, here's what a traditional meal looks like in this country. And let's start looking around and see what we can find. And so that also builds that process. And that's something I encourage parents to do. I have a class called the Family Table Reset, where people learn sort of this thing. And parents forget, back in the day, you had a big family because your kids helped. And I think parents forget, your kids are there to help you. They can wash dishes. They can do the laundry. They can look for recipes. They can order groceries online. If you're ordering groceries online, they can take a recipe and make a shopping list. So these are things that I would have them help with. And they felt good about it, because it's also giving them pride in something that they're doing.
Yes, yeah. And you talk about, on your website anyway, how through cooking, you're teaching kids presence, to be present. You're teaching them patience and creativity. Can you talk, because those are such life skills to have. Can you talk a little bit more about that, please?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, in cooking, I will say this, I've noticed a shift the past 5 years with young people. They're like, what next? But cooking actually teaches you nothing. Nothing is next. You're waiting. You're letting the vegetables roast. You're letting the chicken sit and saute, and you're not touching it because it needs to cook. So nothing is next. Maybe washing dishes or cleaning the table, but just wait. And so then they actually have to pay attention to those cues. Like, is the chicken or whatever brown enough? Is it cooked through? So it forces them to be present. And also the safety factor of not walking away when you're cooking something in the kitchen is vital. So that's the presence and the patience piece. And the creativity, because for me, I want kids to know, again, this is about that mistake making. You're going to screw up. Everybody screws up. In a recipe, it's the best thing to screw up, because you may have thought you were making A, but now you're making B because it didn't come out the way you anticipated. I tell people, and there's so much truth to this, some of the best things that we know came from the biggest mistakes. There is a theory that puff pastry came from a pastry cook who forgot to put in enough butter. And so he sandwiched in the butter, and then there was this better product. And I tell people two things. Cake pops, for sure. We made cake pops when I worked at the Plaza Hotel in the early 90s because we were using our cake scraps. Somebody was, let's not throw away food. And then a naked cake was someone who probably didn't know how to decorate a cake. And they were like, I can't decorate, so I'm just going to put this really thin coat of icing on here.
Those are such great lessons for life, really.
Yeah.
Because as you said, falling forward, we're all going to make mistakes. But if our mistakes can turn into something that's better, maybe not immediately, but down the road, that's incredible. Yes.
It's a great lesson to learn, because with kids, it carries over to their academic life, because they feel safe enough to make a mistake. They know, all right, I can take a chance, whatever, on this test and guess, or whatever they're doing, either in sports or academically. And no, it's okay to just try and put your best foot forward.
Yeah. And when you're teaching, are you finding that kids of all ages are gravitating towards this? Can you, so that's one question. And have you seen sort of an evolution, or young people having a real aha moment, or can you anything come to mind?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, kids of all ages love cooking. I mean, literally as young as it gets to 18. And I do think those aha moments come from the little things where they're like, I can make this. I can cook for myself. Oh my God, I made this and it tastes great. That's probably one of the biggest aha moments, because kids do have a lot of self-doubt and not a lot of trust. And I don't know how old you are. I'm 55. So I am of that generation where I felt like my mom was a bit of a, I want to say helicopter mom, but she was a working mom. So she wasn't at home. So I was at home doing what I wanted. I was cooking. I did live near my grandparents, but I had a lot of freedom, where kids don't have that same freedom anymore. And I know for a fact that kids also don't go outside the way they used to.
Mm-hmm.
Having that space for them to cook, it just builds that creativity piece. And that builds that I am creative. I can do that. Because I also hear kids say, I'm not creative. I hear adults say that all the time. I'm not creative. You are creative. We're only limiting ourselves when we say.
I would agree with that. So it gives kids that real sense of accomplishment too.
Yes.
Because they complete something from start to finish.
Yes.
So that's huge.
Yeah.
And it's what I love. And I'm going to be thinking about this differently now the next time.
Next time you
cooking. Yes. Because I think we all take it for granted. Yet you've taken it to another level where you're saying, okay, sit back and let's just really appreciate the moments and the privilege really of cooking.
Absolutely. Not everybody has access to food. And so I am also really about honoring what we have and not wasting it. I mean, I have a program, it's called Gather to Give, and it's teaching kids about philanthropic work through food. So this month I said, we're going to make a pie and you're going to take it home, because giving back is also giving to yourself. And they were just thrilled to hear that.
Isn't that?
Yeah. And they were actually shocked, but we made apple pie. So we had apple skins and oats. And I said, I don't want to throw the apple skins away. So we're going to make bird food. And they were like, what? We're going to make bird food? And they loved that we took something that they might typically throw away and mixed in a little bit of peanut butter and oats and molded it, put it outside. And that also like that, they were like, oh my gosh, it was literally, you could see light bulbs going off in their head. Like, we can do so much. The world is our oyster.
What a wonderful story, Melanie. That's fantastic. That's great. And what a difference. You taught the kids that, and then and at the beginning of our conversation, you taught them also the power of and.
Yes.
Yes. So, knowing what you know now, and I think looking at it from an entrepreneurial perspective in your business, but also as a parent, what would you do the same, and what would you do differently?
I mean, I think I would do almost everything the same. What I would do differently is I would do it earlier. I really didn't start my own business until 5 years ago. And there's definitely a sense of I'm running out of time. And I do wish it started it earlier, but I also really believe that every moment puts us where we are. And so I wouldn't change anything because I might not be here. I'd be somewhere else.
Yes. Yeah. Which reminds me, you went through a difficult time from a health perspective, and you trusted your own instinct and your inner voice, and you were given a diagnosis, and the doctor said that you were one. Can you expand on that? Because I think that is such a great lesson for all of us.
So I actually had pneumonia 2 years ago. I think it was 2 years ago. I went back for a follow-up, and my primary care doctor said, I hear a little wheezing. Can you follow up with a pulmonologist? One of the things that happens is when you work in food, everyone tells you their food stories. And this pulmonologist had a side business. And I appreciated the connecting, but also he was really not focusing on me. He was focusing on talking to me about food. And he's like, you have asthma. And I was like, what? How could I have asthma? I'm 53, never had asthma. He's like, you have asthma. Take these inhalers, come back next month. So that went on in the third month. And I said, I do not have asthma. Like, I've done everything you've told me. I've used these inhalers. I actually didn't even hear the wheezing, by the way, but I was a little short of breath. And said, no, you have asthma. And I was like, no, I don't. And then I said, well, why would I have asthma? He said, you're overweight. And I said, do you have asthma? And he said, oh, touche. But I was serious. I was serious because just because you're overweight doesn't mean you have asthma, and it didn't come out of nowhere. So that's actually what I needed him to say to me. I needed to hear him say that to me. And I made another appointment with a different pulmonologist who was a 180. I'd never met this man. And he was like, have you ever worked around flour? Because there's baker's lung. He was doing this whole deep dive. He did some testing, and it turned out they saw a tumor in my lung, which is a type of cancer called neuroendocrine cancer, which is very rare. And they said it was probably from 9/11. And I emailed the doctor, the original doctor, and just said, I want you to know that you misdiagnosed. I didn't want it to come off as adversarial, but I wanted him to be aware. You didn't give me the appropriate diagnosis. I actually have neuroendocrine lung cancer. And I want you to know that it's important to actually listen to your patients. And that was it. And then it was a Sunday night. He called me at 9 p.m. and I did not answer. And my best friend from high school said, like, why would you not answer? And I said, because he needed to absolve himself of something. And that's why he was calling me. And I didn't need to give him that. He needed to sit with the fact that he made what could have been actually a deadly error.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
He needed to sit and be uncomfortable with the fact that happened. And I deleted the message that he left, and I don't have any qualms about it at all. I think that was a learning moment for him. At least I pray it was.
Mm-hmm.
The appendectomy thing also, I was told I was ovulating, having ovulatory pain. It wasn't appendicitis. So just learned over the years, and I do believe this from growing up on a farm, because on a farm, you have to pay attention to yourself and to nature and to the signs that are being given to you. And if you ignore the very thing that's being put in front of your face, it just doesn't work out. You have to pay attention. And I think that's why the mindfulness piece is so important, because you should be paying attention to what's right in front of you. And I just knew I didn't have asthma. And I was like, I'm not going to ignore this anymore. And obviously grateful that I did not.
Yes. So you were your own best advocate. And it's interesting. We as humans, we bring all our own judgments. And you've been consciously non-judgmental throughout your life. But we're surrounded by that. So well done to be your own best advocate. So I just wanted you to share that, because it's a good reminder for all of us.
It is. And I really can't express enough the importance to every person, man, woman, child, just to follow your own instincts about whatever it is, because people say like, oh no, I'm just overreacting. I'm just, you know what? It doesn't matter. Just listen to yourself, because you know yourself better than anybody, any doctor.
Yes. Thank you. May I ask you a couple of questions off of my board game? Now you're talking. You've told me so much. Which is fantastic. And it's, can you describe your favorite childhood memory that involves food? You did a little bit, but can you go into more detail? Because it just seems to be so aligned with who you are.
I mean, truthfully, there are so many, but one of the ones that was sort of like a ritual was every February we did butcher animals. We butchered pigs. And it was a very much community-driven event. And there would be 30 to 40 people from the community there. And I just always remember like all the aspects of it. And some of them are a little gruesome that I won't go into. But the feeling of community, because that's a way to sustain yourself also. And I know, there are people who are vegan who might be turned off by it. And I understand that. But it is, especially, in the 70s, that was sustaining yourself. But it was always cold, but it felt warm. And it was just this like really beautiful collective people together for a common cause with a common goal. And it was every February. And I just always remember like that experience year after year and knowing that it's going to happen. And I do believe that's why traditions and rituals are so important, because it gives you something to look forward to.
And that's really what you've done with your company. You have created a community, and every time you teach a class, that's a community that may not ever exactly be duplicated again, but it's that incredible moment in time where everybody gets to be together in their own special way. That's right. Thank you. Can you please? When was the moment that you were forced to grow up faster than you wanted to grow?
Oh my gosh, I would say when I moved to New York.
You just in the short time.
Because I definitely was used to just depending on my parents, and not, they still supported me a lot. Moving here it's not cheap to live here, and I was young. And my dad was like, I don't want you to take the subway, because it wasn't so safe back then. And I think that made me definitely grow up fast. And believe it or not, again, so grateful for growing up on a farm and having instincts. I did almost get mugged once, and I wrote about it in a newsletter, and I was sitting waiting for friends. It was like 11:30 or midnight, and I was on Park Avenue, and these 4 guys walked by, and I just had a bad feeling. And I got up.
You trusted your instinct.
Really fast back to the hotel. And I turned around and they were right behind me. And I just walked. They're not walking into the lobby of the Four Seasons Hotel. And I walked in, and, that piece definitely made me grow up, because I had to be aware in a different way than I was on a farm.
Right. And you were still so young too. You said you were your early 20s?
Yes, definitely.
And you go from young, completely different worlds. One more question I could ask you, tons more. What is the most favorite thing about yourself?
I think that I genuinely love people.
Yes, of all ages.
I truly want to hear people's stories. It can be, I think, for a person who's not like that, it almost is off-putting because they're like, why is she asking me questions? But yeah, I think my favorite thing is that I love people.
Okay, well, that's terrific. I'm going to ask you one more, just one more. Who is your greatest influence and why in your life?
I mean, doesn't everyone say their mom?
Not everybody.
My mom. I mean, if anybody's ever heard me talk about my mom, I say I can't talk about my mom without crying. And why was my mother was 10 years older than my father. My mother was an engineer and my dad was an entrepreneur. And my sisters, who are from my mother's first marriage, told me that people called my mother a whore. And that was because she married a man that was 10 years younger in 1969. And my mother didn't care. And my mom literally didn't care. And I think one of the things about me is that when people talk poorly about me, and usually it's out of either like jealousy or something like that, I use that as a tool for my inspiration. And I don't care what other people say about me. And my mother was the same. And also my mom being an engineer, she was the only woman in with 60 men. And I just think, and she was a product of affirmative action. They hired her because she was a woman, but my mom never let anything deter her. And I feel like she taught me that the only person that can stand in your way is yourself.
You're right. Yeah. And when you say that, and from what you've told me already about your mom at the beginning of our conversation, you said your mom not judgmental at all and said to you, you do what you love.
Yes.
And don't let anybody tell you any differently. I mean, when you look at your mom's life experience, that absolutely plays out because your mom was probably judged all the time.
Yeah.
Probably in a role that she loved that people said, what are you doing here? Get out of the sandbox. You're a woman.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she didn't ever let that stand in her way. And I think shockingly my mother was she was so smart and she had a way of, we could be in the grocery store and someone would come up and tell my mother their life story. They would cry on her shoulder. I remember I was a teenager and we were at the grocery store and she saw a young man and she just looked at him and said, is everything okay? And he started crying and he's like, I just found out my mom had cancer. And I just remember thinking like, wow, that's like a really unusual skill that my mom has to recognize that something's off in a stranger, but to have a stranger in return share. And I think it's because they said that she did not judge them.
Everybody else walked past. So I think you have a lot of your mom in you. The apple doesn't fall from the tree. So,
that's the greatest compliment I could ever hear.
Well, Melanie, what are some words of wisdom that you can share with other parents, please?
Just allow your kids to be who they are and be what they want to be and not to impose our feelings that we want for them on them. They're going to blossom and bloom and become the little butterflies that they're meant to be and do what they're meant to be if we give them that space.
Well, that's words to live by. Thank you. Not always easy, but words to live by. A good reminder.
I don't know that my son would agree. No, he would. I practice what I preach.
Oh, well, thank you very much for sharing your wisdom and your passion with us and for giving your insight and that will help other parents.
Thank you.
I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you so much.
What I admire about Melanie's work is how grounded and accessible it is. No perfection required. Through cooking, Melanie reminds us that curiosity, self-trust, and connection are learned by doing, by showing up, making mistakes, and gathering together. Thank you for listening, for choosing presence over perfection, and for being part of conversations that bring us back to ourselves, our families, and our communities. You've been listening to Now You're Talking. Parenting with a busy career while guiding kids through the lure of screens isn't easy, but meaningful connection is always worth it. Take a moment to start a conversation with someone you care about. It could be the highlight of their day. Until next time, let the conversations begin. Now you're talking.
I'm Michelle Abraham, and we are honored to have Adrienne Giffin's Now You're Talking podcast on our High Vibe Podcast Network. For more high vibe shows like hers, head on over to highvibepodcastnetwork.com and grab your free gift from our gift vault from all of our hosts. Until then, stay high vibe.